My parents told me they would raise my rent unless I became my sister's free nanny. Can you imagine hearing that from the people who are supposed to love and protect you? Stay with me, because this story will leave you questioning what family really means. My name is Autumn Riley, I'm 23, and after finishing college I moved back home to save money. I thought it would be temporary, just a stepping stone until I could afford my own place. I paid my parents a modest rent every month, and even though it wasn't ideal, it felt like the smart choice. That was until my older sister Vanessa had a baby with her husband Darren. At first, everyone was excited about the new addition to the family. I was happy for her too, even though Vanessa and I never had the closest relationship. But slowly, that happiness turned into something darker. My parents, Colleen and Howard, started telling me that I needed to step up and help Vanessa. They said, "Family helps family," and they meant it in a way that didn't sound like a suggestion. It sounded like an order. Before I could even wrap my head around it, I was being asked to babysit constantly. If Vanessa wanted to nap, she dropped the baby in my room. If she wanted to run errands or go out with Darren, she left the baby with me. And when I said I was tired, my parents looked at me like I was the most selfish person alive. One night, after I finally told them that I couldn't always be available, my mom crossed her arms and said, "Fine. If you don't want to help, then your rent will triple." My dad nodded along, as if this was perfectly fair. I remember sitting there, stunned, wondering how they could turn something so cruel into a condition of my living under their... It wasn't just about the money. They knew I couldn't afford to move out. They knew I was trying to save. So what they really meant was, do what we say or we'll make your life impossible. It hit me then that my parents didn't see me as their daughter. They saw me as free labor. The betrayal stung deeper than I can describe. I wasn't refusing to help because I didn't love my niece. I was refusing because I was exhausted, because it wasn't fair, and because it wasn't my responsibility. But to them, none of that mattered. What mattered was making Vanessa's life easier, even if it meant crushing mine. That night, lying awake in my room, I felt more trapped than ever. My parents had always favored Vanessa when we were kids, but I never thought it would follow me into adulthood. Now I realized nothing had changed. I was still the second choice, still the one expected to sacrifice, still the one they could use without a second thought. And that's where my story really begins. Every morning, before I could even rub the sleep out of my eyes, my sister Vanessa would barge into my room with the baby. She never asked, never knocked. She just placed her daughter in my arms and left. Sometimes she didn't even say where she was going. It became routine. My alarm clock wasn't the sound of my phone, but the cries of my niece at 6 in the morning. At first, I tried to tell myself it was temporary. I told myself Vanessa was just overwhelmed, that maybe she needed help adjusting to being a new mom. But as days turned into weeks, it became obvious that this wasn't desperation, it was entitlement. She expected me to drop everything and be her built-in nanny. If I complained or even sighed too loudly, she would roll her eyes and say, "You live here for cheap, Autumn. The least you can do is help." It didn't stop there. My parents, Colleen and Howard, backed her up at every turn. The moment I pushed back, Mom would scold me, saying, "Don't be selfish, Autumn. Your sister needs you. Family comes first." Dad would just shake his head in disappointment, as though I'd committed some crime by wanting a life of my own. But what about my needs? I was working part-time, trying to pick up extra shifts whenever I could to save for my own. Babysitting from morning until night meant I couldn't stay late at work. It meant saying no to friends when they invited me out. Slowly, I stopped getting those invitations altogether because people knew I'd cancel. My life shrank down to the four walls of that house, to diapers, bottles, and rocking a baby to sleep while Vanessa and Darren went out to restaurants or took weekend trips. The exhaustion wasn't just physical, it was emotional. Every time I heard Vanessa's footsteps coming down the hall, I felt dread because I knew she'd be leaving the baby with me again. I started to lose myself, and when I tried to explain that to my parents, they acted like I was being dramatic. Mom even told me, "One day, you'll thank us for teaching you responsibility." That stung more than anything because it wasn't responsibility they were teaching, it was exploitation. Vanessa, on the other hand, didn't even bother pretending she appreciated. One afternoon, when I tried to point out how much time I was spending caring for her child, she laughed in my face. "Better get used to it," she said, smirking. "You're basically the help around here." Her words cut me deeper than she realized. It wasn't just a joke, it was the truth of how she saw me. I wasn't her sister anymore. I was her free babysitter, someone to unload her responsibilities onto without guilt. That night, I sat in my room with my journal, writing down everything. The hours I spent, the names they called me, the way they made me feel. Each word was heavy, but it gave me clarity. I began to see that this wasn't love, and it wasn't family, it was control. And the first sparks of resentment started burning inside me, slowly growing into something I knew I couldn't ignore forever. It didn't take long before I realized this wasn't just about helping Vanessa. My parents finally admitted the truth one evening at dinner. I was exhausted from another full day of babysitting and mentioned how I needed a break. My dad set his fork down, looked straight at me, and said, "Why would Vanessa pay for daycare when you're right here in the house? That would be throwing money away." The word stung. It wasn't about family support. It wasn't about me being kind. To them, I was the cheaper option. My parents didn't see me as their daughter who deserved her own life. They saw me as free labor, a way to save Vanessa and Darren money. And save money they did. While I was stuck at home rocking my niece to sleep, Vanessa and Darren were living it up. They went on vacations to Florida and California, posting photos online of sandy beaches and fancy dinners. They bought a brand new couch and redecorated their living room. They even showed off new outfits and gadgets every other week. Meanwhile, I couldn't even afford to eat out with friends because I was barely scraping by with rent and my part-time job. It became painfully clear that they were only able to live that way because of me. Every dollar they didn't spend on daycare went toward luxuries, while I sacrificed my time, energy, and freedom. The unfairness of it all made my chest tight. I felt invisible, like I existed only to make their lives easier. But the betrayal didn't stop at money. It opened up a flood of memories from my childhood, things I had pushed down for years. Vanessa was always the favorite. She got the newest clothes, while I wore hand-me-down. She got to go to cheerleading camp, while I was told we couldn't afford piano lessons. She was praised for every small achievement, while my accomplishments were brushed aside as expected. Back then, I thought maybe I was imagining it. Maybe I was being dramatic. But now, as an adult, I saw the truth with painful clarity. Nothing had changed. My parents had always put Vanessa first, and they always would. Only now, instead of comparing us as kids, they were using me to fund her lifestyle. That realization broke something inside me. I had always hoped that once I grew up, once I worked hard and became independent, my parents would finally see me as equal to my sister. But here I was, 23 years old, still stuck in the same pattern. Always second best, always expected to sacrifice, always the one carrying the burden so Vanessa could shine. I remember lying in bed that night, staring at the ceiling and whispering to myself, "They don't see you, Autumn." They never did. The betrayal was deeper than anything I had felt before. For the first time, I understood that I wasn't part of a loving family. I was just a resource, a tool they could use until I broke. And the worst part, they didn't even feel guilty about it. The first time I told them no, it felt both terrifying and freeing. Vanessa came into my room late at night, her baby already half asleep in her arms. She said she and Darren wanted to grab drinks with friends, and that I could just watch the baby for a few hours. I was bone-tired from work, and had already spent most of the day babysitting. For the first time, instead of swallowing my frustration, I shook my head and said, "Not tonight, Vanessa. I need to rest." Her face twisted instantly, like I'd just insulted her. "Wow, really?" she snapped. "If you really loved your family, you'd help without making excuses." Minutes later, my parents stormed in. Mom scolded me with the kind of sharpness she usually reserved for strangers. "Your niece needs you, Autumn. You're endangering her by being selfish." Dad shook his head and muttered something about me being ungrateful. In their eyes, I wasn't a tired young woman with her own life. I was a monster for daring to put myself first. The guilt hit hard like it always did. But underneath it, something else stirred. A small flame of defiance that whispered, "They don't own you." After that night, I started testing my boundaries with small refusals. If Vanessa called me at the last minute while I was at work, I let the call go to voicemail. If she tried to dump her daughter on me so she could go shopping, I said I had other plans, even if those plans were just sitting in my room alone. Each no was a tiny act of rebellion, and though my family always reacted with anger and manipulation, I felt a little stronger each time. Of course, the guilt trips never stopped. Vanessa's favorite line became, "You'll understand one day when you have kids." My mom would sigh and tell me, "Family helps family," as though that phrase excused everything. And my dad? He didn't bother arguing anymore. He just looked at me with silent disappointment, which somehow hurt even worse. That's when I started keeping a journal. At first, it was just a way to vent, to let the anger out on paper instead of exploding in their faces. But soon it became something more. I wrote down every insult, every guilt trip, every time Vanessa mocked me or my parents threatened me. Seeing it all laid out in black and white made it real. It reminded me that I wasn't crazy, that this wasn't love, it was control. And as the pages filled, an idea began to form. I couldn't keep living like this. If I wanted a future of my own, I'd have to escape. But leaving quietly wasn't enough. Not after everything they had taken from me. No, I wanted them to feel what I had felt, trapped, helpless, and powerless. So while I began planning my exit in secret, another thought lingered in the back of my mind. When I go, they'll regret ever underestimating me. It happened on a Friday evening, The kind of night when all I wanted was to curl up in bed after work. I had just stepped through the door when Vanessa shoved the baby into my arms without a word. A diaper bag dangled loosely off her shoulder, but before I could ask anything, she was already heading for the door with Darren trailing behind. "Where are you going?" I asked, shifting the baby against my hip. "Oh, just a weekend trip," she said casually, like it was no big deal. "We'll be back Sunday night." "Thanks, Autumn. You're a lifesaver." And just like that, the door slammed behind them. I stood there stunned, the baby squirming in my arms. I checked the diaper bag, praying it had everything I'd need. But there were only 2 diapers and half a can of formula. No wipes, no extra clothes, not even baby food. My stomach dropped. How could she just leave her child like this, unprepared, without even asking? By the time I made it to the kitchen to see if there were any supplies left, I was shaking with rage. There was nothing. No baby food, no milk, not even a clean bottle. I felt trapped. They had walked out, leaving me responsible for a whole weekend, and I hadn't agreed to any of it. When I confronted my parents, hoping they'd finally understand how unfair this was, the reaction was worse than I imagined. My mom waved a dismissive hand and said, "Stop overreacting. Your niece is fine. You should be grateful you get to spend time with her." My dad added, "You're making a scene. Vanessa deserves a break, and you're just being dramatic." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I was furious, exhausted, and completely unprepared to care for a baby all weekend with almost no supplies, and they acted like I was the problem. It felt like I was screaming underwater. No one was listening, no one cared. Something inside me cracked that night. I broke down in my room, sobbing into my pillow while the baby cried in the background. My parents didn't check on me, didn't ask if I was okay. To them, my meltdown was just another tantrum, something to roll their eyes at. But to me, it was the moment I realized the full truth. I wasn't a daughter to them. I wasn't even a sister. I was free labor, nothing more. And once that realization settled in, the pain gave way to anger. I thought about every sleepless night, every insult, every guilt trip. I thought about how they had stolen my 20s from me while Vanessa lived carefree, spending money on vacations and luxuries while I was stuck changing diapers. That night, wiping tears from my face, I made a promise to myself. I wasn't just going to leave. I wasn't just going to escape this house. I was going to make them regret ever treating me like I didn't matter. For the first time, my heart felt steady. The plan wasn't clear yet, but the decision was. They wanted a free nanny? Fine. But soon, they'd learn what it felt like when the help walked away and never looked back. After that weekend disaster, something in me changed. I was done being their doormat. The crying, the yelling, the guilt trips, it all hardened into something sharper, resolve. If they wanted to treat me like a servant, then fine. But servants eventually quit. And when I quit, they were going to feel it. The first step was money. I picked up extra shifts at work, volunteering for the late nights and weekends no one else wanted. My parents thought I was just desperate for more spending cash, but every dollar I earned went into a secret savings account they didn't know existed. I skipped coffee runs, stopped buying new clothes, and even canceled streaming subscriptions. Every sacrifice felt worth it because I could see my freedom inching closer with each deposit. Then came the apartment hunt. Late at night, after everyone was asleep, I scrolled through listings on my phone. Most were too expensive, but eventually I found a tiny studio. Nothing fancy, just 4 walls, a bathroom, and a kitchen. But to me, it looked like heaven. I toured it during a long shift I claimed to have at work, signed the lease quietly, and kept the keys hidden deep inside my bag. My escape route was real now. While I built my new life in secret, I also started pulling back from my old. For years, I had been the one cooking, cleaning, folding laundry, and picking up after everyone. Now, I stopped. Slowly at first, skipping a few dishes here, ignoring the laundry there, but then more boldly. The kitchen counters piled up with dirty plates, the laundry basket overflowed, and suddenly my parents had to do the chores they once took for granted. Of course, they complained, but I just shrugged and said I was too tired from babysitting. Vanessa noticed too. She started making little digs like, "Wow, Autumn, you're really slacking lately." I'd just nod and sigh, acting burnt out. Let them think I was weak. Let them believe I was stuck. The more they underestimated me, the sweeter my revenge would taste. At night, when the baby was finally asleep and the house was quiet, I would sit on my bed and imagine it, the day I walked out for good. I pictured the look on Vanessa's face when she realized her built-in nanny was gone. I pictured my mom scrambling with bottles and diapers, my dad pacing angrily because things weren't being done. I pictured their perfect little world collapsing without me holding it up. That vision became my fuel. Every insult, every guilt trip, every heavy sigh of disappointment from my parents, it all went into the fire that kept me moving. They thought I was trapped, but I was already halfway gone. And soon, they would wake up to find out the truth. The girl they thought they controlled had been planning her freedom all along. And when I left, I wasn't leaving quietly. I was leaving in a way they would never forget. I knew I couldn't just walk out on a random Tuesday night. If I wanted my escape to sting, it had to be timed perfectly. So I waited, watching and planning. Then, like fate, Vanessa handed me the perfect opportunity. One Thursday, she came into my room and asked if I could watch the baby that week. She and Darren wanted to go away, just the two of them, for some couple's retreat. I smiled sweetly and said, "Of course. I'd be happy to help." Inside, though, I was already mapping out every hour of their absence. The moment they drove off Friday evening, I got to work. My heart pounded with adrenaline as I packed my life into boxes and bags I had hidden under my bed and in my closet for weeks. Every book, every piece of clothing, every small item that was mine went into the car. I moved quickly but quietly, careful not to wake the baby asleep in the next room. Trip after trip, I carried my belongings out to my old, beat-up car parked at the curb. The night was cool and still, almost eerily calm, as if the world was holding its breath for me. With every load I moved into my new apartment, I felt the invisible chains around me snap one by one. By Saturday afternoon, my room was nearly bare. Only the furniture my parents had provided remained. It looked less like a bedroom and more like an empty shell. And in a way, that's what it had been for me, a shell of a life I was never allowed to live fully. Before leaving for good, I sat at my desk with a pen and paper. I thought about writing a long letter, pouring out years of hurt and resentment. But then I realized they didn't deserve that much of me. So instead, I kept it short and sharp, the way a knife slices clean. Mom, Dad, I am not your maid. I am not Vanessa's nanny. I am your daughter, though you've never treated me like one. You used me until I had nothing left to give. But now you'll see what life is like without me to carry the weight for you. Don't call, don't beg. I'm done. I folded the note and placed it neatly on my empty desk where they couldn't miss it. When I finally walked out with the last bag slung over my shoulder, I didn't look back. My heart raced, but it wasn't fear. It was freedom. I strapped the baby safely into her crib, whispered a quiet goodbye, and locked the door behind me. Driving away that night, my car full of my things, I felt lighter than I had in years. The house that once suffocated me was shrinking in the rearview mirror, and ahead was a tiny apartment that was mine and mine alone. They thought I'd never leave. They thought I'd always be there to clean, to cook, to babysit. But soon, when they returned and saw the empty room and the note on the desk, they would finally realize what I had known all along. They never deserved me. Colleen and Howard were the first to notice. They came home late Sunday night, expecting Autumn to be in her usual place, curled up on the couch with the baby, exhausted after another weekend of babysitting. But the living room was silent. The diaper bag sat untouched in the corner, and when Colleen barged into Autumn's bedroom, she froze. The drawers were empty, the bed stripped bare. Only a folded piece of paper sat on the pillow. Howard snatched it up and read aloud, his voice trembling with anger. You never saw me as your daughter, only as free labor. You threatened me, manipulated me, and treated me like a servant. I won't live like this anymore. Don't call me. Don't look for me. You'll see how much you depended on me now that I'm gone. Colleen's face twisted with rage. Ungrateful little brat, she screamed, throwing the note across the room. Howard clenched his fists. After everything we've given her, rent, food, a roof over her head, this is how she repays us? But his words rang hollow. For the first time, they both realized how much of their household had rested on Autumn's quiet shoulders. The news hit Vanessa even harder. She returned Monday morning, expecting to dump her baby back into Autumn's arms. Instead, her parents delivered the note with grim expressions. Vanessa nearly shrieked. You're telling me she just left? What am I supposed to do with the baby now? Howard muttered. Figure it out yourself. She's not here anymore. Vanessa's face turned pale. She and Darren had been skating by financially, relying on Autumn's free childcare to keep their lifestyle afloat. But daycare in the city wasn't cheap, nearly half of Darren's monthly paycheck. Within hours, the reality sank in. Vanessa frantically called Autumn, but every call went straight to voicemail. The baby cried in the background, and Vanessa's voice cracked. Autumn, please. I can't do this without you. Just come back. Autumn listened to one of the voicemails later that night from her tiny studio apartment. She didn't respond. By the end of the week, Darren was in full-blown panic mode. Bills piled up. Their weekend outings dried up. Vanessa was forced to cancel her gym membership and quit her hair appointment. Darren worked late, but every extra hour barely covered the new daycare bill. Their once perfect Instagram-ready lifestyle began to crumble. Meanwhile, Colleen and Howard realized the silence of the house was unbearable. For years, Autumn had been their buffer, cooking meals, cleaning up, managing the baby while Vanessa slept in. Now, Colleen's back ached from constant chores, and Howard grumbled while loading dishes. They snapped at each other daily. One night, Colleen called Autumn in tears, her voice soft for the first time in years. "Please come home. We'll lower your rent. We'll help out more. Just please." Autumn took a long breath before answering. Her voice was calm, steady, unrecognizable from the timid girl they once controlled. "You made your choice when you treated me like nothing. Now you get to live with it. I'm not your maid. I'm not your nanny. And I'm not coming back." She hung up, smiling faintly for the first time in years. Autumn had imagined this moment 100 times, but living it felt even sweeter. After she left, the cracks in Vanessa's perfect life began to spread faster than anyone expected. Without her free nanny on call, Vanessa was drowning. Daycare costs gutted her bank account. The designer purses and lavish vacations she flaunted online disappeared one by one. First, it was the glossy coffee table she had bragged about on Instagram. Then the expensive stroller Darren had insisted they needed. Soon, furniture started vanishing piece by piece, sold to cover bills she never thought she'd struggle to pay. Vanessa hated it, hated the budget grocery store runs, hated explaining to her friends why she couldn't meet for weekend brunch anymore. She lashed out at Darren daily, snapping at him for not making more money, for not stepping up. Darren, already weighed down by his own financial stress, retreated further into silence. Their once curated image as the golden couple was crumbling, and Autumn couldn't help but smirk at the thought of them scrambling without her. Colleen and Howard didn't fare much better. With Autumn gone, babysitting duty fell on their shoulders. At first, they thought it would be temporary, just until Vanessa found another arrangement. But weeks turned into months. Their evenings were no longer filled with quiet dinners or weekend wine nights. Instead, they were chasing after a cranky toddler, collapsing into bed exhausted, muttering about how ungrateful Autumn had been for leaving. But Autumn knew the truth. They weren't angry because she left. They were angry because she finally stopped letting them exploit her. Family gatherings became awkward battlegrounds. Vanessa, bitter and exhausted, shot daggers at Autumn across the table. Colleen would make passive-aggressive comments about family duty and loyalty, while Howard huffed about how things used to be better. But Autumn no longer flinched at their words. She sat taller, calmer, sipping her wine with a small, knowing smile. Their resentment didn't touch her. It only reminded her of how much power she had reclaimed. Every glare, every whispered insult, every accusation that she had abandoned them was, to Autumn, proof of her victory. They had built their comfort on her back, convinced she would never walk away. And now, stripped of the crutch they had leaned on for so long, they were stumbling, forced to live with the consequences of their entitlement. She didn't need to yell, didn't need to explain or justify herself. The silence of her absence was louder than any argument. Their downfall played out in real time, and all Autumn had to do was watch. When she returned to her apartment each night, locking the door behind her, she felt a sense of peace she had never known in her parents' house. No chores left waiting. No baby's cry yanking her out of sleep. No manipulation disguised as family love. Just freedom. And every time she thought of Vanessa selling another piece of furniture, or her parents groaning about another sleepless babysitting night, Autumn smiled. Justice wasn't always loud or dramatic. Sometimes it was as simple as walking away, and letting them collapse under the weight of their own grief. Autumn leaned back on the small but cozy couch of her new apartment, a faint smile tugging at her lips. The walls weren't grand, the furniture wasn't expensive, but everything around her belonged to her alone. No strings, no manipulation, no whispered bargains about rent. Just freedom. The air even felt lighter here, as though the weight of years of being her family's unpaid servant had finally lifted. Her mornings were her own now. She woke when she wanted, brewed her own coffee, and left for work knowing she wasn't chained to someone else's schedule. At her full-time job, she began earning respect as a reliable, independent woman, something her parents had refused to see her as. Each paycheck meant something more than money. It was proof she had escaped their grip and carved out her own life. Slowly, Autumn started reaching out to old friends, people she had abandoned when her time was stolen by babysitting duties and endless demand. At first, she was nervous. What if they resented her absence? But her friends welcomed her back, happy to see her reclaim her spark. Saturday nights became dinners out, movie nights, and laughter-filled evening, things she had been denied for so long. Piece by piece, her social life grew back, a garden blooming after years of drought. Then one afternoon, her phone rang. The caller ID read Vanessa. For a moment, Autumn considered ignoring it, but curiosity made her answer. Autumn. Vanessa's voice cracked through the line, thick with exhaustion. Please, I need your help. Darren's working late, the daycare bill is drowning us, and Mom and Dad can't keep up anymore. The baby is, she stopped, her voice breaking into sobs. Can you come back? Just for a little while. Autumn's grip on the phone tightened, but her heart stayed steady. She pictured the years she had given away, the countless nights rocking a crying baby while her sister slept, the lectures from her parents that she was lucky to live under their roof. She thought of the threats, the rent ultimatum, the manipulation. "No, Vanessa," Autumn said softly but firmly. "I can't." "But Autumn, you made your choices. All of you did. And now I've made mine." Her voice carried a finality that silenced Vanessa completely. After a long pause, Autumn ended the call. That night, she sat by her apartment window, looking out over the glowing city. A thought came to her, sharp, honest, liberating. Family betrayal was the deepest wound she had ever felt. But she had survived it. And now, her revenge wasn't shouting, wasn't fighting, wasn't even watching them crumble. Her revenge was this: living free, happy, and untouchable by their greed. For the first time in years, Autumn truly felt at peace. She whispered to herself, "The sweetest closure is mine." And with that, she turned off the lights and drifted into the kind of sleep that only freedom could bring. Do you think Autumn made the right choice by leaving her family behind? Or should she have stayed and tried to fix things? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. And if you enjoy stories like this, make sure to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a new video.